And Don't Be a Square unofficially in at 24:58. This is the second now of 2 heats. 3,000 meters on each rower.
To me, what will be interesting is the tactics on this row. If you haven't spent much time on this assault air rower, the main difference between the Concept 2 and the assault air rower, one of them is that the carryover, when you ghost ride it, it carries over at a much higher velocity, meaning that as you're doing your transition, those meters are continuing to accumulate at a more rapid rate that you would normally see on a Concept 2. So you're not punished by doing multiple transitions because that flywheel is going to maintain its momentum much better than it would on a Concept 2. And so in the past, you've seen teams where they've rotated every 30 seconds. But the problem with that in this event is that we just saw it's a 25-minute long time domain. And if you think you're going 30 on, you're kidding yourself. You've got to stay on there longer and pick an easier intensity.
This is Sam Sorella, man. It's Tyler Eggerman closest to the camera and Dennis Samsonoff. We saw them have a great event 3 last night to close things out. Once again, row, swim, run presented by Tier, and we are on the first portion of this event. 3,000 meters need to be completed on each rower. After that, it's that 250-meter swim and then the 2,400 meters on the assault runners. Team Hercules.
And Chris, we just saw Phil Muscarella from Sam Sorella, man. He actually had it looks like a swimsuit on, the full body suit. Given the distance at about 250 meters, is there a distinct advantage for the full suit versus maybe a jammer or even a Speedo?
Look, I did an Ironman. I did Ironman Brazil in a Speedo, all right? A 9-hour event. Yep. If you want to win, then you know what you're going to do is you're going to put on something that's going to give you a better position to win and ignore the discomfort. Yep. You know what? The truth is that if you get a little sunburn, a little chafing, that's going to go away. I mean, I admire that. I did a Frogman Challenge in Coronado with Navy SEALs, and I wore my Speedo. You know what? None of them did, but the next year, because I beat them, they were all in Speedos.
Hey, you look good, you feel good, you play good, right?
It's all about looking good at this point.
Speaking of looking good, man. Look at these two Aussies.
That's the Thunder from Down Under. James Newberry and Con Porter on the rower. Matt DeLugos is resting. The Thunder from Down Under, they are in second place overall. Only 24 back of the boys for first.
And this is a team that I think can really push the pace here. You know, obviously they're accomplished individual games athletes, both James Newberry and Con Porter. But one of the things they really excel at is when you get into the water, whether it's, you know, on the paddleboard, on the swim, we typically see them both out in front performing quite well.
What I noticed there is the breathing, the rhythm of the breath. Look at it. It's so visual. And what's beautiful about that rhythm, that cadence, what you see, that will be the cadence that he has on the swim because he breathes every stroke, meaning it's 1, 2, 3 breath, 1, 2, 3 breath. And that will be the same cadence that he has on the run. And that, without having those transitions, is going to put him at an advantage. That was really good. The mistake I see, though, is that their recovery is random. They don't have a recovery routine. Sometimes they're talking, sometimes they're leaning over, and that's a mistake. That's a miss. If you have a warm-up protocol, you have a race protocol, what about your recovery protocol?
The Thunder from Down Under are just about done with their 3,000-meter rows. Their judges' hands are in the air. Here are your overall standings coming into this event. They, again, are just 24 points back of the boys for the lead. And as you said, Tommy, they can do some damage once they get in the water, and they look to be one of the first teams onto that 250-meter swim. We also saw Mayhem in Paradise. They currently sit in 11th place overall. They won the opening event of the competition, but since then, they have yet to finish higher than 7th.
Yeah, I think that might have been a misreading on the judge's part. It's about 6.5 minutes for a 3K. That would have, I don't know, that might have been a world record. Even with Matt DeLugos, who is, you know, a fellow rig shaker and can get
pull the handle off that thing.
Yeah, he can get the flywheel humming on the rower.
So everyone stand down on that one. And the two top teams are right in the middle of the floor. You can see in the middle of your screen, Noah Olson. If you look at our cameraman, Noah Olson is right behind him. He and Travis Mayer rowing away, and now here comes Chandler Smith. So they're able to keep an eye on the team that is the closest to them in the overall standings. And they have about 700 meters to go on the rower there where Noah Olson is working.
Yep, and I spoke with Travis Mayer. We stayed in the same hotel, walked over to the venue with him today, asked him how they're feeling. He said, honestly, no stress. They're just having a good time. He said the best part about this competition is, individual athletes joining up for a team. There's really been no pressure. And he's like, and having a swimmer like Noah on your team in this type of event, he's like, Chandler and I can go, crazy on the rower and let Noah get out there a little bit. And, we know we're going to follow behind, and we have the capacity to keep pace once we get out of the water.
And that's a sound strategy. I mean, Noah Olson recently ran on a track a 5:09 mile within the last month. So he's legit. You send him on that swim, he's going to make time.
You ever run a 5:09 mile?
I don't think I've driven a 5:09 mile.
So what's interesting, the difference between this air rower and a Concept 2 is it takes a little more effort to get your distance in. The target speed for this, if you were going to do a like for like, I would see it roughly 2 seconds per 500 meter pace slower on an assault air runner. So if you're looking at targets for these athletes, that's essentially what you're seeing. Like earlier, we just saw Noah at a 141 per 500 meter pace. So normally he would be rowing his 2K at somewhere around a 139. I think the advantage that the Aussies that they're going to have is that if they can get to that water first, they're in clean water. Yeah. There's no obstruction. There's no one in their way. They don't have to deal with obstacles. And let's face it, that lack of stress of having to go around someone that doesn't know how to swim is very, very frustrating. And they're going to have clean water.
You can see Con Porter already getting
my gosh, a swim
He's
cap.
ready to go.
Dude, that dude is race ready.
And now judges' hands are starting to go in the air across the field here. Thunder from Down Under is off, and if you let Con Porter and James Newbury get out front in a swim, good luck catching those guys. Here comes Matt DeLugos. He could probably backstroke his way to the platform and not cost his team whatsoever.
Wow.
They have a solid lead on the rest of the field here. So Porter and Newbury will be the first two men in, and now Matt DeLugos right behind them.
What a difference between the first heat and this heat. And look at the prep that they had. Goggles on way before hitting the water.
Here comes Team Hercules. Logan Collins, Roy Gamboa, and Travis Williams. Let's go down to Jamie Higia, who is down there where the athletes are getting into the water. Jamie?
Con Porter was the first one to hit the water. He actually opted to leave his shoes on. As his second teammate, James Newbury, takes off his shoes, as so does Matt DeLugo. They're both going to swim bare feet, heading over that platform. It is nice they're out in front. There is no line here at the ramp, which is pretty narrow. These guys are all heading over, starting to bottleneck up. You don't want to get stuck in the back of the pack of the swim, but here they all come.
There's Chandler Smith. Mark Hutchinson was behind him, and that's where it starts to bunch up. There's Rich Froning.
So Rich loves this event. Rich loves it because he wants to go out and swim by himself. He is a great swimmer. He's confident in a pack of people. He'll navigate this group. He doesn't want to wait for his teammates. He wants to be free to fly. And when he does, he's ready to go on that air runner. This is a workout that Rich loves.
And Chris, we were talking earlier about the evolution of swimming for CrossFitters. And I think, agree or disagree, but seems like Rich really embodies that, right? Because, in the early days, he wasn't a great swimmer. Right. And there's that famous photo or the video of him in the pool event, hips down, feet down, almost doggy paddling. And now he's so comfortable in the water.
That's the thing about Rich, is that he is a true professional when it comes to creating excellence. I mean, little do people know is that Rich used to be a baseball player. And when he blew out his throwing arm, you know what he did because he was a pitcher? He retrained and spent an entire year learning how to throw with his left. And now you can't tell the difference between his left or his right. That is a true athlete. And so when Rich didn't know how to swim, the fact was that then he figured it out. I always tell people, if you're not swimming a minimum of a mile, don't waste your time. Rich Froning won't get in the water unless he swims 4,000 meters.
Wow. That's...
Yes. For a CrossFit athlete, that's unheard of, and he does it twice a week.
Man. Look at the kind of spread we have here. looks like a buckshot of athletes out in the water. Chris, what's the challenge here in terms of trying to find your bearings? We see athletes kind of deviating from that straight line towards the buoy.
The whole key in this swim is that you want to stay out of that negative space, meaning that you don't want your mind bogging down after you get kicked in the head or that you got your goggles flipped off. And the problem is that a swim such as this is going to throw your mindset off where you're no longer thinking about winning because you just got kicked in the face. That's really hard to keep that positive frame of mind when you got a bunch of just insanity all around you. And that's why the leaders have an advantage. They've got that clean water.
Saw the Thunder from down under. It looked like the three of them were all staying together to get to the platform, and the team that's out there monitoring the swimmers are kind of having to corral them a little bit to go on the right side of the buoy.
But like we talked about, one of them went in the water with their shoes on. I don't know if you've ever swam with shoes on, but you are substantially slower. For me, in 100 meters, I'm about 20 seconds slower every 100 meters just by throwing on the shoes. And so I'm a little surprised by that, and it will be interesting how he comes out of the water. I think it was Con Porter that came in, right?
Yeah.
And the majority of these athletes are cutting in the inside of that buoy. They're supposed to go around that thing.
I'd have to imagine it's possible maybe the buoy deviated just a little bit. So they're cutting just on the inside and then a little slalom action. I don't know.
There's Rich Froning on the right side of your screen.
Yeah, I want to correct, maybe because I went to the athlete briefing and they talked about the buoys and the key buoy, and I think they explained that the only buoy that you must go around is the blue one.
The blue one, gotcha.
The other ones are just for sighting and to help.
Ah, gotcha.
So as long as you're within a certain radius of that, you're not going to get called on it. So everyone, it does seem to be adhering to that rule about going to the outside of the blue one.
Yep.
Now, Chris, we're both Californians. Well, you may have relocated, but you know, I grew up on the Central Coast of California. Swimming in the ocean is something that you grow up doing, you spend your entire life doing, you don't really know much different. But a lot of these athletes, especially from landlocked states, their swim time is done in a pool.
That's right.
And what do you find are the major differences between those two types of swimming?
So when I came out earlier today, the first thing I did is I looked at the condition of the water, the chop. I mean, normally when you're not swimming in the ocean, the water is very calm, and that's the biggest disruption for someone that's never swam in the ocean. This water, what you're looking at, is very calm. It's very calm, and if you find that you've never been in the ocean before and you jump in, you're much more buoyant, and the feel of the water that your hand has because of the salt, it's much thicker. And so you get a better grip on that water and you feel fast. So this, to me, is ideal swimming conditions. It's warm, it's not choppy. Wow, look.
Well, there goes Rich Froning out of the water. He was able to pass the Thunder from down under, as was Noah Olson. And we saw a couple other men also get out as well, ahead of Newberry and Porter.
This is, like we said, this is an event. Rich loves this event because he's able to do what he does, and that is, in his heart, even though he's on a team, Rich behaves, he's like an individual. He wants to just go and not wait. And so when he's given that permission, you're free to fly, it's like, man, I am going to swim hard.
The Tractor was the first team out of the water. They're coming off a fifth-place finish in event number 4. And now DeChico and Froning are on the runner together. There goes Alex Smith. This is going to be big for Mayhem in Paradise because right now I think they are the only team with 2 runners.
And with this chop, we just saw it a second ago. Luke Parker already joined as a 3rd team member. So Mayhem's got all 3 athletes back with their runner as we see just this massive collection of bodies getting out of the water.
There's Willie George. We also saw Travis Williams make his way out of the water. There's Roy Gamboa.
And, you know, there's some instability there on that ramp with all of these bodies just piling up. They're not going to win points as a Baywatch reboot getting out of the water, but...
Well, what's tricky, though, here's the problem. When you're swimming, all your blood goes to support the muscles that are moving, which is your shoulders, your chest, and your back. And then when you go to stand, that blood's sitting in your upper body. What you really need to do is transition that in the last 30 seconds by accelerating your kick. By accelerating your kick, you're going to transfer that blood from the upper body to the lower body so that you're not, let's say, dizzy when you go to stand. And that's a skill that if you're swimming slow, unfortunately, you just don't have that ability.
Tractor, Mayhem, and Training Culture all got their second runners onto the air runner at about the same time. So right now that looks to be your battle for first place. The time to beat is 24:58 unofficially from Don't Be a Square in heat number 1. And there's Rich Froning and Angelo DiCicco.
So a little bit about Angelo. Angelo, you know, obviously he's a CrossFit Games multi-champion, but he's a great runner. Angelo DiCicco in July ran a 5:15 mile on an air runner.
Oh. What is that? What is the difference, the percentage difference compared to just flatland?
So these new air runners, they're slightly slower, but they're really close in the ballpark in terms of the velocity that you would see on flat ground. Rich is in a 5:10 mile. So Rich actually is a faster runner than Angelo. This, for them, you can see their stride length has been opening up. They're much more comfortable. They're communicating. It's a sign that they feel good.
Yeah. Rich Froning swapping in for Angelo DiCicco. Check back into the Thunder from Down Under. And it looks like the teams are aligned on the runners the way they are in the overall standings, because you saw the boys, the team of Noah Olson, Chandler Smith, and Travis Mayer on the runner closest to the finish. And Thunder from Down Under is right next to them because they currently sit in second place, and then next to them is a team in third. And that's Phil Muscarella, who's on the air runner on the right side of your screen for Sam Sorella, man, as Matt DeLugos is checking Con Porter's monitor. Now DeLugos getting to work. But they were the first team into the water, but then surrendered some ground to two teams from Spain, the Training Culture and Tractor, as well as Mayhem.
See if they can hang on to it. Two final athletes, Grit House.
James Newbury, Con Porter, and Matt DeLugos are trying to cut into that 24-point lead that the boys have on them in the overall standings. Mayhem, meanwhile, is trying to get back inside the top 10. And they were fighting for the lead with both Tractor and Training Culture as we approach the 20-minute mark. 10 minutes to go before we hit the time cap.
So one of the things that I do know Mayhem does is they practice these transitions all the time. And if you're at home watching, one of the things about an air runner that happens, they don't spin backwards. So you can attack that belt and land on that tread, and it won't flip you on your bottom. You won't fall. And that's one of the things that Mayhem realizes, that we can attack and jump on it, fly like a Superman, land and put our hands on those rails and keep that belt moving. And that's the key. Don't let the belt slow down in those transitions, but you have to have that confidence.
There's another look at Thunder from Down Under. The top three teams on your screen right now. On the far right, that's Travis Mayer for the boys. In the middle, Thunder from Down Under. And on the left, Sam Sorella, man. Those are your top three teams in the overall standings. As far as the race for first place in this heat, it was between Tractor, Mayhem, and Training Culture.
And Training Culture, you know, slightly different name, but they're actually one of the surprise teams during the early parts of the season this past year. Their affiliate, CrossFit Zuriola, so the full name was CrossFit Zuriola Training Culture. They actually won the European quarterfinals for the team. Two members from that crew are competing right now with Alexander Ioannis and Pablo Cazales. So they're very capable as a team. They had to withdraw, unfortunately, during the semifinals. And one of their team roster members, Oyana Moya, went individual and is actually competing here as an individual.
There's Alex Smith and Sam Dancer for the Smith Bros. And that is Anyo Lakai and Pablo Cazales on the runners for Training Culture. 10th place overall coming to this event. This is your top team in the overall standings. Noah Olson and Travis Mayer and Chandler Smith. Less than 8 minutes to go before we hit the time cap. Judges' hands will go in the air when their respective athletes have just 100 meters to go. And don't forget about the sprint to the finish here.
It's impressive how fast they're moving considering we're 22 minutes in. I mean, you got to remember that time accumulates, and even though we can look at the distance of the run, the fact is that they've been moving hard for 22 minutes, and look at the speed that this field is moving. It shows the change in the sport. I mean, these look like runners.
I'm curious, Chris. You see the air runner, you do see the railings on the side. I've noticed from time to time that sometimes people will change up their arm motion because of the, being in that box of the railing. How much does that factor in? You see changing up the arm motion, maybe having to keep the elbows and arms a little bit higher and tighter than usual.
Yeah, so, I worked with Jason Khalipa early on, and Jason Khalipa, he would have notoriously crossed his arms across the midline of his chest, and because of that, his stance had to widen, and so he was essentially had his feet apart mainly a foot, and that was a mistake. You want to have your feet land like a parking strip apart. And so Jason, I told him, I go, when you think about your arms, I need to think elbows down and back, and if you load the shoulder properly, the arm will come forward by itself. The problem with Jay and several CrossFitters in the field is their traps and their triceps are so big that they can't get the clearance, and so you see those elbows swing wide, which is true. But what you really want to think about in arm position is elbows down and back, and that's it. And if you do that, the hands will never cross the midline. If your hands are crossing the midline in order to create stability, your feet are going to go wide, and that's a mistake because now you're moving side to side.
We are now inside a minute to go before we hit the unofficial time to beat from Don't Be a Square, 24:58, and you can see on that last shot, Matt DeLugos was peeking over at now Noah Olson's monitor to see where he is, and a hand is in the air for Rich Froning and Mayhem in Paradise. And they could really use an event win right now. Angelo DeChico now inside 100 meters. Froning is off, he is done. Angelo DeChico is just about finished, and Mayhem in Paradise looks like they're gonna get close to a top three finish because hands in the air now for both Thunder from Down Under and the boys. Luke Parker's across. Here comes Froning and DeChico, and they're gonna get in about 10 seconds ahead of Don't Be a Square. So an event win for Rich Froning and Mayhem in Paradise. Don't Be a Square looking to slot in now in second place. So third place in the event up for grabs. And here come the boys, and that's going to be big for them as they will extend their lead in the overall standings over Thunder from Down Under. The Smith Bros are right behind them. We'll have to see how that race plays out.
Looks like training culture came in there as well.
I think the tractor may have gotten across, but we'll have to wait for confirmation on that.
So I caught a split on the Mayhem team when Rich got on, and it was 8.5 minutes total time on that runner. So if you back out the distance and you look at what was a projected mile time from that, it's a 5:30. A 5:30 for that team. That's legit,
man.
And that's a real time.
Well, now you talked about this earlier with Roy McCurtis. More teams coming across the finish line. We saw Logan Collins, Team Hercules, and I believe that's training culture now coming in. But the fact that these runners have been out in the heat changes the resistance a little bit.
That's right. It's going to make that runner move, but the fact is that you still have to move the legs. And you are sitting there, and we're talking about moving your legs at a 5:30 mile speed, basically, and they're 25 minutes in. That says something. I mean, remember, Rich tried to do back in 2014 a 30-minute event, and he walked. Now he's at a 5:30. It shows the progression of the sport.
Amazing.
It used to be where you could have some weaknesses and still perform well overall in the competition. That is just not the case anymore.
No, if that's the thing, is that if you're not capable, I mean, every single one of the individual males, for example, every one of them is safely under 7 minutes for a 2K row. Every one of them can run a sub 6 minute mile. That shows you something about the versatility of these athletes.
And that used to be a criticism back in the day. Some of these top-level athletes couldn't run.
That's right.
And now they're,
Well, I mean, that's the thing, that what we're seeing in this sport is that you're seeing performances that have never been recorded before, because normally you have a weight class in rowing, right? There's a difference. If you have more muscle mass, you have an advantage. The problem is that when you take that bigger athlete, you make them run, they got to carry that mass. But what we see in the sport of CrossFit now is that there's these anomalies. People that weigh 198 pounds that can pull a 6'10" and run a 5-minute mile.
Now, Sam Sorella, man, the team that sat in third place just came across the finish finish line. They had 331 total points, and a lot of the teams right behind them in the overall standings have already come across. There was only 30 points separating third from seventh. So Sam Sorella in danger now of falling out of the top three in the overall standings.
And they made a sizable jump last night. They won the finale today, number 2, and that moved them from 6th up to 3rd. So, you know, with these tight point spreads, all it takes is one event, a slip here and there, and we're going to see, you know, that leaderboard get shuffled.
You have to admit, it's a little surprising to see so many teams coming in at the exact same time. It's just like a time domain of an event of like 3 minutes that you would see such a cluster of group. It's really impressive, the level of competency in these long events.
These were your overall standings coming in. The boys will extend their lead over Thunder from Down Under. Sam Sorella in danger of falling out of 3rd place. And the team you don't see right now is Mayhem in Paradise. Courtesy of their event win, they are very likely to now move back inside the top 10.
Looks like maybe the Grit House.
That is the Grit House. They're the final team out on the floor. Kevin Steinhaus, Josh Harden, and Hunter Williams coming across the finish line. So every team in the second of these 2 heats will make it inside that 30-minute time cap, and nobody does it more quickly than Mayhem in Paradise. They beat the top time from the prior heat by about 10 seconds, and they will pick up their 2nd event win of the competition, and it comes at a perfect time for Rich Froning and company as they look to climb back inside the top 10. But a great start from Thunder from Down Under. Looked like they were going to be hard to catch.
Yeah, they set the early pace on the rower. You know, they had a clean runway in front of them as they made their way to the water. Had all 3 athletes the first to jump into the water, but you know, once we got to the swim, we saw some athletes make a move, namely Rich Froning and company. We saw a few athletes jump out in front, looked like one of the athletes from Training Culture. But Mayhem was the first team to get all 3 athletes back to the runner. And you heard Chris say, holding a 5:30-ish mile pace on that air runner, that's going to do the trick as they got to march to a much-needed event win. And sitting around 10th place, this should definitely move them up in the standings. I hope we keep them around the top 5.
And with that, now the women's elite teams have begun. As you've probably figured out by now, there's no rest or no break between the actions. So we are just going to roll through these events. Now the elite women's teams on to the rower, and as they get started, we'll go down to Jamie Hagia, who is with your winner for the men's event, Mayhem in Paradise.
Rich, you guys clearly do a lot of endurance training. How much swimming, running, and rowing do you guys incorporate in your actual training?
Well, we run and row a ton, and then depending on time of the year, we swim a lot. I think we've only been in the pool twice since the off season. We did some triathlons this fall, and really when it's cooled off, I didn't want to get a swim membership, so we didn't swim a ton. So we got in the pool twice before coming here, so it feels good. It's almost like second nature now that we've done it so much.
Angelo, Rich was one of the first ones onto the runner. When you joined him, how did you guys decide to divvy up the running on the 2 assault runners?
We knew that Rich would probably be off first, and then we said, whenever I get on, we'll go, when we're all 3 get there, we'll go a minute rotation the whole time. So Rich had a little extra at the beginning, but then minutes after that.
And Rich, how much, you guys have a lot of team camaraderie, and how much did that play into this event?
Oh yeah, I mean all weekend. It's just a ton of fun. This is good for us. You know, me and Angelo have quite a bit of competition experience, but getting Luke some experience under the adversity, the communication when stuff doesn't go the way you want it to, and just seeing how he can bounce back from that. So it's really a really good learning experience for Luke, I think, and having a ton of fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Rich Froning, Angelo DeChico, and Luke Parker picking up their 2nd event win of the competition, and likely